Good afternoon. This is Steve Campbell of Cornerstone Wealth Advisor Group. I love going to investment meetings and learning. I am 70 years old, but if you think that we ever get to an age where we cannot learn, then we'll stop learning. I met people last week that are in their 80s, still very much involved in business. One of which is George Gilder, who has an investment newsletter. He was a professor at Stanford University back in the 60s and is one of the major players in technology. And at age 84, still he ran a marathon last year at age 83. And I was able to talk to him for about 20 minutes, and that's one of the things that I love about going to Freedom Fest. This year it was in Las Vegas, 3,000 people, is just the exchange of ideas and hearing things that you would not normally hear in other venues. But I want to talk a little bit about some of the things that I heard, some of the highlights. One of the first people that talked was John Mackey. Not the football player for the Baltimore Colts and the Cleveland Browns, but John Mackey of Whole Foods. He talked about all of his years starting Whole Foods out until he sold the company to Amazon for $13.8 billion 4 years ago. And really the highlight of his talk was how instrumental his father was of keeping him from giving up his dream. There was a flood in Texas, actually. He opened up his second store in Austin, Texas, and there was almost immediately a 100-year flood, just totally wiped out that store. And people came in and helped him. His father was just instrumental. And so the takeaway from John Mackey was, no matter what you think you know, there is someone that's older and wiser that you should be talking to on a daily basis to glean from their wisdom and their experience. So that was one of the first meetings I attended at Freedom Fest. The second meeting, kind of an interesting panel discussion between four presidents of small to mid cap oil producers. And there is a big discussion today. Are gasoline engines going to be a thing of the past? And they laughed and said, here's a statistic that almost no one would know today or even admit to on either side. Under Joe Biden, oil production in the United States has risen 20%. Now, the mainstream media wouldn't want to admit that because they believe he's a champion against fossil fuels. No. And as these presidents of these oil companies said, if the government wants to reduce fossil fuels, all they would have to do is take all the tax benefits out of investing in oil. That would cause oil to dry up immediately. But in fact, oil and natural gas are in products, 6,000 different products. We only think of oil and natural gas as being in cars, but that's just not the case. And they said, we will continue. The demand for oil will continue to rise as it has over the last 4 years. The demand for oil, even with the electric cars, and electric cars today only amount to about 4% of all the cars on the road. And these presidents said, we know that there will never be a mandate outlawing gasoline engine cars and demanding that people drive electric vehicles. Now, so is oil a good place to invest in? Maybe. It's not uncommon today to invest in big oil companies and get dividend yields of 4 to 6%. But I thought that was kind of an interesting evaluation. There was a panel, they call it the Global Economic Forum. Grover Norquist, who is big in the United States on trying to convince the United States government to quit borrowing money so that we will be able to survive in the future. and also against excessive taxation. But there was an economist from Germany, an economist from basically the European nations. There was an economist covering China and India, and an economist covering South America. One of the highlights of this meeting was the German economist, and said Germany was always in the past the strongest nation in Germany, in Europe. But Germany has kind of lost its way. They have outlawed fracking, but they have also shied away from nuclear power. I think one of the things that was talked about a lot is that nuclear power, despite the Chernobyl accident and 3 Mile Island in the United States in the 1970s, nuclear power is going to be a big area in the future. Very low cost, very safe. But Germany is no longer fracking, and they're no longer using nuclear energy, and therefore they have the highest electricity prices in the world. But here's the other thing, is that Germany has really gone liberal in that they have adopted universal income. In Germany, they now pay each citizen over the age of 21 $3,500 a month. So you know where that's going. They cannot find anybody to fill the jobs because there's no incentive. The government's paying them to sit at home and play video games. And Germany, which once was an economic power, is kind of crumbling before our eyes. Everybody talks here in the United States about China. The economist covering China says that China's real estate market has essentially collapsed, and real estate prices are down 40, 50, 60% over the last 5 years. And there was a push in China to move people from the country into the cities for workers, and at that time it kind of propped up real estate prices, but it has failed, and that China is struggling financially like never before. And that same analyst covers India. India has the strongest economy in the world, growing at 8 to 10% a year. And India, like China, has several billion people with a B. The government's having a little bit of a hard time adjusting to the boom in economic growth, but that doesn't mean that they're not having a flush in cash, which they are. I think the other part of that economic summit that I thought was really interesting was the country in the world that has made the biggest transformation for good is Poland. Poland used to be a communist country years ago. They have gone to a free market system of economics. They run surpluses. There are people moving to Poland because of the growth of the economy, the growth of technology in every area. And one of the areas that these people talked about was wherever you find individual freedom, financial prosperity will follow. And that became the question of what about America, as we see individual freedoms disappear, and the threat in our banking system of a central bank digital currency that would allow the government to surveil all of our financial transactions. As these economists said, America should look at Germany on one hand and Poland on the other, and be determined not to make the mistakes that the socialist nations of the world are making. There was talk about education, and there's a push in the United States for school choice, micro schools, private schools, homeschool co-ops. Kids are leaving the public school over the last 5 years, 5%. Over the last 4 years, 5% of public school children have left the public schools. 5%. We're talking about millions of kids that are leaving the public school. Their parents are looking for educational opportunities that are not teaching our kids. And as I once heard, when the schools quit teaching reading, writing, and arithmetic, they're in trouble. And now that's not happening in the public schools at the pace that it used to be. And parents have awakened to that and said, we're not going to continue to do that. I want to talk lastly about a conversation that took place with Steve Forbes. Steve Forbes is the owner of Forbes magazine, financial publisher of financial news. Steve Forbes also ran for president in 1996. And ironically, he ran on a flat tax that if you adopted a flat tax, you could do your tax return on a postcard. And Steve Forbes said back in 1996, the idea was if you didn't make $50,000 a year, you would owe no income tax. Anything over $50,000, you would pay a flat tax at 18%. And that would be it. So let's just assume that you have a two-family income of $100,000 a year. You list your income $100,000 minus your $50,000 exemption, and then your taxable income is $50,000, and at 18%, that would be, I believe, $3,600. So that you would owe in taxes. So actually, no. 18% of $50,000 is more than that. It's over $8,000 that you would owe in taxes, $9,000 to be exact. But the reason I wanted to mention about Steve Forbes, the person who was interviewing him, asked him about artificial intelligence. And, that's a word that 2 years ago no one was even hearing, artificial intelligence. And now the code word for artificial intelligence is AI. And AI is coming into so many areas of our life, and people, it's good and bad. And so the individual asked Steve Forbes what he thought about artificial intelligence. And he said, on one hand, just like the internet can be used for good, or it can be used for bad. You can use the internet to search the Bible, or you can watch pornography on it. So it depends on the individual and in the hands of that individual how good artificial intelligence is. But here's a statistic that I thought was amazing to me. Over 50% of people who die in a hospital, they are hospitalized for some illness, over the age of 70, they die from an infection that they received in the hospital. With the help of artificial intelligence, deaths in the United States in 2023 from infections was reduced by 80%. And he said the protocols from artificial intelligence were able to give the doctors a protocol to avoid an infection in the hospital. So that is news, I think, that is encouraging to me. And when I come away, I always come away very encouraged about the United States, that there are people who are wanting positive change. I even heard last week from an individual who has growing influence in California, that as bad as we hear about California, this individual said, California is not a lost cause. People in California are waking up to the crazy liberal views of California, and school district by school district by school district, they're recalling some of the most liberal school board members in California. In the city of San Francisco, 3 of the city council members in 2023 were recalled, voted out of office. A special election to recall them, and they did, and they lost their positions. Now, I'm not ready to move to California. In fact, I don't even like visiting California anymore. But it's interesting how that when things get too crazy one way, they tend to go back. And I think America is starting to have a little less patience with the wokeism, in the area of male and female. As a Christian, I believe that issue is settled. God made man and made woman. Our gender is set. and it's not optional. In the world that I live in, and I think parents are concerned when they have their kids in a school where wokeism is being not taught but jammed down their throats. And the good news I heard last week is even in the most liberal state in the United States, in California, parents are pushing back and saying, no, not here. So when I come back to you the next time, we'll talk about money and investing. But listen, you have a great day, a great summer. I can't wait for the fall for things to cool off a little bit. And by the way, when I was in Las Vegas last week, I was there 4 days. The temperature never got below 115 any day we were there. In fact, the first day we were there was 118, and they had set a record of 120 2 days before we were there. So coming back to Virginia, 85 and humid doesn't sound so bad today. So God bless you and have a great day.
Content in this material is for general information only and not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. All performance referenced is historical and is no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. All investing involves risk, including loss of principal. No strategy assures success or protects against loss. The opinions expressed in this material do not necessarily reflect the views of LPL Financial.